Now, rumors like this are always going to be taken with an absolute grain of salt, but given the fact that today is the 6-year anniversary of Man of Steel, and we know that the DCEU as we know it is kind of up in the air, a headline like this coming out of We Got It Covered, titled Warner Brothers Seriously Considering a Justice League Reboot, does seem to make a large amount of sense given everything that's happened with Zack Snyder and post Zack Snyder, but Jeff Johns and Justice League's failings and everything else in between. But let's find out more, because this whole thing is very fascinating to me. Now, it says here that this website recently brought the news that Warner Brothers is working on a Justice League reboot, with Suicide Squad James Gunn potentially directing. It's worth clarifying exactly what we've heard about this reboot of the world's finest heroes, though, and how it could come about. Now, this to me is wild. Okay, like I just want to come out and say this is wild if true. I don't know if it is. It doesn't make a lot of, I mean, look, it doesn't make a great deal of sense to me, but it could possibly. Now, we know, and this is, okay, we know it's a speculative term, but I believe that Warner's is going to throw as much money as they can at James Gunn once he's done with Suicide Squad, once he's done with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, because they want him to kind of oversee the DCEU. There was a video before I talked about where he is being brought in potentially to be the new architect of the DCEU and bring his passion and his comedy stylings and everything else to running this particular show. And I do feel that that is overall the better idea. This is one of the reasons why ultimately Star Wars has failed, is they've got business people running the scene, Kathleen Kennedy, but they don't have an overseer that is looking at everything from the, and kind of controlling it. And I think this could be a good move for James Gunn, although I don't know how long it would last, considering that he wants to direct this stuff and not necessarily oversee it. And the last time they brought in someone to direct, produce, and oversee, that was Zack Snyder. And look, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, Warner Brothers did him dirty. They had no faith in him with BVS. They screwed with the final print that screwed everything up, and we are where we are as a result of that. I do oftentimes wonder what would have happened if that extra 30 minutes, the BVS Ultimate Edition, would have gone to theaters. Would it have been received as negatively as it did? The answer to that is simply no. And we wouldn't have people raising 20 grand in order to try to pressure Warner Brothers into releasing the Snyder Cut. Right? So we know that there's bad stuff there. There's been a lot of bad decisions made behind the scenes at DC Films, and now we're kind of in this situation. So according to We Got This Covered, they've been informed that the team lineup will consist of Batman, Superman, Batgirl, Black Canary, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Flash, and Green Lantern. As we know, Robert Pattinson's Dark Knight will break away from established canon, with the DCEU being split into two separate continuities going forward. I believe that's more about two separate timelines, not necessarily separate continuities. Two separate timelines. I think that is the smartest play. If they want to go back and do movies that are prequels, that would be fine. Establishing those situations and having that then maybe have ramifications later on down the road in the later films that are tied into the current DCU timeline would be perfectly fine. Separating it into two split continuities is, well, dumb. Going on here, they say, as we've discussed before, WB is hoping to bring the two universes together down the line. The source is unclear about the exact nature of the plot of the film or the intricate details of how this multiverse rearrangement could occur, but we've been told that Justice League may reboot may be the culmination of the strategy. So yes, Gal Gadot and Jason Momoa would appear. The same presumably goes for Journey Smollett-Bell, who debuts as Black Canary. We're unsure about Ezra Miller's continued involvement in the franchise. Look, I don't blame Ezra Miller for bailing out of Warner's or bailing out of the DCU. They have dicked him around so long with this Flashpoint film or the Flash movie. I mean, it's like at this point, if he, there's nothing even at Comic-Con about it, right? There's nothing that we know about it's going to happen. If Ezra Miller bails, I wouldn't blame him. After that, after Justice League and the Crimes of Grindelwald kind of just, he's been in some not so good Warner Brothers produced films. Now, finally, it says the project's only in early discussion phases at the present, but the studio said to be seriously considering it and seems excited for the future now that Gunn's on board, with the filmmaker expected to hang around to produce and oversee the development of the DCEU over the next few years. Now, I'm on board with Gunn coming on to work on this. I'm on board with that. There are people out there who aren't on board with that, and they have very odd reasonings for this. Oftentimes it goes back to Gunn's tweets, but look, that's old James Gunn, not current James Gunn or present James Gunn, so you got to just kind of let that go. But I think he's a talented storyteller. I think he's a talented filmmaker. I think he has a unique voice, unique comedic stylings, and I think in order for DC to compete with Marvel on a level that's not only going to be financially well received, but also audience well received, they've kind of got to go down that pathway. If you don't believe me, look at Aquaman. Aquaman embraced the more crazier side of things. It did. It really embraced it. And you know what? $1 billion. Shazam really played up the comedy. Didn't do as well as I wish it would have, but I think, again, it was caught in the middle of Captain Marvel and Avengers Endgame, and it ultimately hurt it. It was another superhero movie leading up to the release of the biggest event of the year, the biggest event of the decade, probably. And I feel like it ultimately ended up getting kind of crushed under that, oh, it's not a Marvel movie weight. And it's one of the reasons why that and Dark Phoenix should have been pushed to further in the year. Shazam should have been an end of year November release, not an April release. I'm sorry. I still stand by that. I think it would have done more money if it would have come out during that time and not had the competition or been up against something as behemothly massive as Endgame. And so, but again, going back to my point, I feel like DC realizes now that when they play up the humor, when they have fun, the movies can do pretty well. And I think that was one of the things that ultimately Zack Snyder was not grasping entirely, even though I like the dark, gritty take on things. I understand why audiences might have had some trouble with that. But when we see it in action, it actually works. And so bringing on Gunn, it could be a good way to really kind of bring about that sort of mindset to help kind of compete with Marvel. And for the people out there that are like, no, no. Here's the thing. Marvel needs competition. It needs actual valid competition. Like Venom was competition in a way that like Marvel was like, uh-oh, we got to lock down this deal with Sony and Amy Pascal in order to make sure that we don't get screwed over by these movies doing well if they're going to maintain control. Now, Guardians getting James Gunn to come back, or, you know, getting him to come back and work on it works out really, really, really well for James Gunn and fans. And then it shows a loyalty from Marvel. Past that, we don't know what's going to happen. If he comes in and starts taking over the DCEU, it's only going to benefit them. Anyway, I don't want them to reboot this because yesterday would have been the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League Part 2. I oftentimes ask myself what could have been with this franchise because I do like it quite a bit. I do respect it quite a bit. And I always feel like it was the underdog and I always feel like it got done dirty. And I feel like it was overseen by people with cold feet who didn't ever have trust and faith in the abilities of the creators that they brought in. And at the first sign of trouble, they ran. And we are where we are. But if it does lead us down the path to bring in someone like James Gunn to work on it, then perhaps it's not all that bad. Anyway, I want to hear your thoughts, your opinions on this. Let me know down in the comments below. How do you feel about the situation? Do you want to see Justice League rebooted, or are you just not happy with any of this and you keep wondering to yourself what the hell DC is doing? I want to hear your thoughts and your opinions. Have yourself a great day, guys, and peace out.